hello everyone. Thank you for joining our seminar of today. It's called Safeguarding Drylands to Achieve Sustainable Development Goals. It will be given by Professor Fernando Maestre. He's a professor of environmental science at KAUST. This seminar will provide an overview of the key environmental challenges affecting drylands worldwide and propose solutions to reverse unsustainable resource use, combat land degradation, mitigate climate change, and preserve their unique biodiversity. Professor Maestre is within the 1% of the most cited authors worldwide. He has published more than 300 articles in peer-reviewed articles such as Science, Nature, Nature Communications, and Nature Ecology. He has published more than 5 books and co-authored more than 60 book chapters in scientific journals. As well, he has been a collaborator in Spanish public radio, has participated in interviews and documentaries in radio and TV. His research has been highlighted by newspapers, web pages, and blogs from Spain and abroad, and he has also participated in dozens of scientific communication events and giving conferences to general public as well to primary and high school students. He has an abroad international experience from US, China, Australia, UK, and Germany, and has led 15 research projects totaling more than 5 million euros. So, thank you, Professor, for being there. Now we will start.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. Thanks everyone for coming to the seminar. Thanks also everyone that is joining online. And I would like also to thank Ana Margarida and the KAUST Sustainability team and the KAUST Students for Sustainability for the invitation. It's really for me an honor, a pleasure to be here today on this special day. I usually move around when I give a presentation, but I will try to stick to the microphone because if I move, I'm afraid that the people connected online will not be able to see. So if you see that I move a little bit, just tell me to stick to the microphone because maybe that can be better. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to be talking today about drylands and about some of the main environmental challenges that environments like KAUST and Saudi Arabia and drylands worldwide face in order to achieve sustainable development goals that I don't need to explain very much about them because they are now surrounding us every day. So today is also a very special day. It's World Environmental Day, and this is hosted this year by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And as we can see in the publicity, I'm sorry, I don't think this doesn't work. Well, anyway, if not, I will point with my finger. This day, the focus put by the Kingdom is in issues like land restoration, degradation, and drought resilience. And we have this tag, generation restoration. So if you are tweeting or putting content in social media about this day, putting the tag will generate more buzz, more attention. Why it's very timely to talk about these things, particularly on this day today. This is also one of the things that I hope that when you leave this room after the seminar, you will appreciate also the importance of drylands and the need to take care to account for drylands, particularly if we are thinking about sustainability for planet at the globally and about the achievement of sustainable development goals. We are in Saudi Arabia, we're in a desert environment, so I don't need to talk too much about why drylands are important. We all know because we live here, but this is very typical when I give a seminar, a talk in a non-dryland environment, that many people, I need to explain why they also need to take care about drylands. Well, when thinking about our planet, we need to take care about drylands. But first of all, let's start from the beginning. What is a dryland? There are many ways that to define a dryland, but we typically use a very simple way, which is based on climatic characteristics. That is the concept of aridity, which I think everyone will understand if, when I explain the definition, which is very simple. The aridity index, which is the official definition for a dryland, is just the amount of precipitation divided by the potential evapotranspiration. How much we get by rainfall versus how much we lose because of evaporation. And when this ratio is below 0.65, is considered a dryland environment. Here in Saudi Arabia, we have it very clear. It doesn't rain much, but we have lots of evaporation. Temperatures are very high. So as a consequence, aridity is very high. The higher the amount of water we lose, via evaporation versus the lower the amount of water we get via rainfall, the higher the aridity. And what many people doesn't realize is the global extent of drylands. You know, if we follow these climatic criteria, drylands cover between 41 and 45% of the terrestrial surface, depending on the database you use. So almost half of the surface of our planet is located within these dryland environments. And they also are fundamental from the socioeconomic point of view because drylands host over 38% of the global population and growing. Right now we are in over 40% of the global population live in a dryland environment. Many times when thinking about drylands, the first images that came to our minds, are these drylands as barren lands, you know, areas with very low productivity, which are not good for agriculture, which, you know, have little biological value. And these are the type of images that many times come to our minds when thinking about drylands. And it's true, you know, these images come from drylands, but it's also true that drylands host a unique biodiversity, include some of the hotspots of biodiversity, for instance, for plants, and they have really stunning and amazing landscapes, biota, endemic species, very diverse communities, which are also very, very interesting from the ecological evolutionary point of view, because organisms living in environments like the environment we are living here now have unique adaptations to survive in these environments, which are adaptations also that we can learn from, we also can use as the world becomes more arid because of climate change, and as we need to adapt ourselves, and we need to adapt our agriculture, and we need to adapt many things in the way we live, drylands and dryland biodiversity can teach a lot of these things. And drylands are not only very important because of their extent, because the amount of people who live in drylands, because of the amazing and unique biodiversity, they are also very important for us because they feed us. You know, drylands include over 50% of the livestock we raise and more than 40% of the agriculture of the food we produce. And some of the largest food producing areas in the world are located in dryland environments. For instance, if you think in the US, for instance, the salad bowl in California is located in a dryland environment, or for instance, in Spain, in Southern Europe, Almeria, which is the driest place in Europe, is the main exporter of fruits and vegetables, particularly vegetables, for the rest of Europe. You know, Germans, Swedes, and all Northern Europeans, they eat all year long tomatoes, mostly because we grow tomatoes in Almeria, in a dryland environment. Drylands are also fundamental for the global carbon cycle. They store more than 35% of total carbon, and they regulate the global climate, and particularly their interannual variability. So drylands are fundamental. This is something very important that we all need to know, and that we need to share. And drylands are very important today, and they are going to be even more important in the future because of ongoing climate change. One of the consequences of climate change, and we all know, is that global warming, temperatures are increasing, and just because temperatures are increasing, the degree of aridity is increasing too. Indeed, global estimates, modeling projections indicate that because of global warming, the global extent of drylands may increase between 11 and 23% by the end of this century. So that means that areas that are not drylands today will become drylands during the next decades, and many areas that are drylands today will increase the degree of aridity. So, you know, environments like Saudi Arabia have a lot of things to teach other parts of the world that are going to become more and more arid, and they are going to look like more and more like places like Saudi Arabia looks today. So I'm not going to talk too much about Sustainable Development Goals. As I mentioned at the beginning, they are now surrounding us. And as you all know, these are 17 goals put forward by the United Nations that have been signed and agreed by all the countries, and that aim to drive everything we do in our planet in order to achieve a future that is sustainable, where humans and biodiversity can thrive, and when many of the environmental and social problems hopefully are solved. And the point I want to make here in my talk is that if we want to achieve sustainable development goals, we need to achieve them in drylands. In other words, we will not be able to achieve these goals if we don't care about drylands and if these goals are not met in drylands. So now I will talk a little bit about what are the main challenges, not all of them, because we could be spending, I could spend hours and days talking about them, but I would like to highlight 5 main challenges that we are facing in drylands today, and we need to address them in order to achieve sustainable development goals. One of them, and perhaps the most important, is the degree of development and poverty, which both are related. And that's why, because over 90% of the over 2.5 billion people living in dryland areas are in developing countries. And as you can imagine, a large percentage of this population live under the level of poverty. Indeed, it's estimated that over 1 billion people directly rely on the natural resources provided by land. That means that they directly rely on the food they can crop, they can on the crops they can cultivate, and also on the livestock they can raise. And if you look at any human development indicator, typically those in dryland countries, in dryland areas, are lower than those in non-dryland countries. This is, for instance, a summary of different human development indicators, and this is just an histogram just to highlight that those from non-dryland countries where their climate is non-dryland, the human development indicators are usually higher than those of countries where all or most of the territory is located under a dryland climate. And I'm not going to talk too much about it, but any human development indicator that you look at, education, hunger, birth mortality rate, etc., are usually lower or higher, depending on which one you are looking at in dryland. This is, for instance, global hunger. And if you see the incidence of hunger is typically, when you see alarming or extremely alarming, you know, almost in all cases, it happens in countries with most of the territory under a dryland climate. Another very important challenge, which is also a key one, is water use. This map shows how much water countries use for agriculture. And there is something quite interesting here, which if you look at for a couple of minutes, you will spot on. You know, the majority of countries, this is at the country level, and there are very large countries with a lot of climates, like the US or China, for instance, or India. But if you look at the countries that use most of the water for agriculture, you will notice countries like Australia, North Africa, Spain, Argentina, countries with, or the US, with or Mexico, large fractions of the territory under a dryland climate. So how is that possible? If one of the key issues that define drylands are the lack of water, the lack of the little rainfall we get. So drylands are not good environments in terms of water received by drylands to grow food. That's because we use below ground water. We use aquifers. We use water stored underneath the surface to irrigate those crops. And one of the consequences of this is that this is a map of the state of aquifers all over the world. Green is where aquifers are in very good state, or so you can see in areas where it rains quite a bit, the aquifers are usually good. But if you go to the red, the orange and red, which are the aquifers that are in bad state, either because they are overexploited, so we are depleting them, or either because they are polluted, or in coastal areas. Also, another big problem with aquifers is that when we use a lot of water from the aquifer, then the water from the sea gets inside, so the water becomes with a lot of salt, then it cannot be used anymore. So if you see in the world where most of the problems are concentrated with the aquifers, they are in agricultural areas, and that's because the use we make of water, particularly in agriculture, to irrigate crops. And this is a big problem in all drylands, and it's a big problem, a big issue here also in Saudi Arabia. We can see, use as an example in this video, is that we will see here in the desert where all these green spots are irrigation crops. So it's water coming from the aquifers. And in this area, there are 2 aquifers, and we can see how these cycles move from one area to the other as soon as we deplete the water from this aquifer and we start using water from another aquifer. So this is completely unsustainable because these aquifers were refilled in the distant past where the climate here was much wetter than the climate that we have today. So we are using this is like fossil water that we are using. We are all the time talking about fossil fuels because we know the concept that these fuels will not be replenished, right? But we don't talk about fossil water because this is the same. This water is not going to be refilled, particularly because we are using it as orders of magnitude faster than the natural recharge rate of these aquifers. And this is a problem not only in Saudi Arabia, it's a problem in drylands all over the world. Related to this, there is also another very, very important problem, which is not discussed so much when talking about the environment, which is food waste. It's the amount of food that we produce, but we throw away, either because at home, because we buy more food that we can eat. So at the end, you know, food is perishable items. So if you don't eat it before will is good, then it's not good for it. We throw away. We throw away food in restaurants. We throw away food on the farm. That happens particularly when we produce so much food that this food cannot get into the market because the price is so low. So either we destroy the farm or either we just didn't even bother in collecting them from the fields because it's more expensive to collect them than to collect them and sell it because the price is very low. And also, of course, the food that se estropea in Spanish, you know, the food that becomes rotten during transportation and so on. That this is, for instance, one of the main problems we have in developing countries, with lots of food gets rotten during the transportation from the farm to the markets. This is, again, a huge problem globally that is also particularly evident in Saudi Arabia, because here in this country it's estimated, there are quite a bit estimates, and some of them fluctuate quite a lot, but these are estimates provided by the Saudi Ministry of Environment, or MIWA, and it's estimated that over 30%, which is pretty much the global amount of the food we produce in this country, is discarded. So it's food that we could eat, but at the end we are throwing it away. So it has a huge economic cost, estimated at over 49 billion. And also something quite important in this country is that the average, every person on average throw away 250 kilograms of food per year. If you think about it, it's a lot of food. And the global average is around 115 kilograms. So as you can imagine, food waste has a huge impact, not only in economic terms, which we are talking because producing the food costs a lot of money, but also on environmental terms, because, you know, we produce greenhouse gas emissions to produce this food. We use water, we use pesticides, we use fertilizers. So the numbers are staggering at the global scale. There are multiple estimates. Here I'm just putting you some numbers. Is that, you know, we are throwing away globally the amount of food we throw away is over 1.3 billion tons. So it's a huge number. It's over 1/3 of the total food we produce. It has a huge cost in terms of CO2, more than 3.3 gigatons of CO2 that we release to the atmosphere to produce food that is throwaway. So it's food that we don't eat. And it's estimated that if use 1/4 of this food could be used, we could feed the more than 795 million people that go hungry at night, that go hungry in bed every night. So this is a really, really huge environmental problem. And also for drylands, what is also particularly important from this is the water we use to produce this food. For instance, these are some numbers that we got from Spain. It's a study we did that was highly debated in the media and by the public. Is that something that happens in Spain and all over Europe is that the European Union has a mechanism that pay farmers to destroy in situ up to 5% of the crop when the prices go down, to avoid the prices going down further. So it's some kind of protection mechanism. So it's amazing. There is a very detailed statistics in Spain and all over the EU where farmers declare how much food they are throwing away on the farm. This is food that has not even entered the commercial market in order to get these subsidies. So you have all sorts of statistics. So we just got these statistics and made some calculations depending on the crop. And we are talking, for instance, for these numbers, for food that is mostly fruit and vegetables that are not even collected from the farm, that are directly destroyed in situ or sent to for animal feeding. So we estimate that in Spain, between 2018 and 2023, on average, we use more than 31 millions of cubic meters of water, which is a lot of water, to irrigate crops, to produce food that is thrown away, directly thrown away on the farm. And from this, more than 10 million correspond to the irrigation. And this is a big issue, and particularly in a country like Spain, when there are a lot of regional tensions, because there are regions that donate water to other regions, and there is a lot of political, social tensions. And if you think it's difficult to believe that we are, using so much water in a dryland country under drought conditions to grow food that is thrown away. And why is thrown away? Because we produce so much food, that the market cannot assimilate. We produce sometimes, and this is unfortunately across the EU. It's not only in Spain, but across the EU. We produce much more food that the market can assimilate multiple times over the year, every year. And this has a huge environmental cost. It's a huge environmental problem. And it's one of the main challenges we have in countries like in dryland environments to achieve sustainable development goals. And of course, we are in drylands. We need to talk about land degradation and desertification, particularly on a day like today. What is desertification? It's very simple. It's land degradation in drylands due to climate change and human activities. And climate change, as you know, is also due to human activities. When we talk about land degradation, we are talking about soil erosion because of mismanagement. We talk about salinization, for instance, because of irrigation. We talk about soil pollution. We talk about everything we do to the land, everything we do to the soil that reduce the capacity of the soil to support life. And that means to support ourselves. I'm talking here about soil and land as synonyms. They are not exactly synonyms, but I will talk about them as synonyms. And something very important that we always forget, or we often forget, we are terrestrial organisms. We don't fly. We are not birds. We live on land, and land feeds us. 99% of the calories that humanity needs and eats come from the land. So forget about these vertical farms. Forget about this high-tech technology. No worry, no way. We are going to be to feed up ourselves with, lettuce grow on a high-tech farm. Forget about it. They need to come from the soil. And if we degrade the land, we degrade the soil, then we will lose the capacity of the land to support life. And it's not only to support biodiversity, to support plants, microbes, animals, it's to support ourselves. And this is something that we really need to take into account very seriously. And the numbers, again, are huge. Again, it's difficult sometimes to estimate this because desertification is something very difficult to quantify. So that's why everyone understands climate change, because you can measure temperature, right? So you can measure how it's ramping up. Everyone can understand biodiversity because you can measure when a species got extinct, right? You had a bird that is no longer there. But because many of the changes with the soil is, we don't know, you go to the market and you still see food, right? Because if it doesn't come from one place, it will come from another, right? But at some point, if we continue degrading land, degrading the soil at the rate we are doing it, at some point, we are going to face very, very, very serious problems. So right now, it is estimated that more than 250 million people are directly affected by the desertification process worldwide, and over 1 billion people are at risk. And if you look at the economic estimates, we are talking about trillions of dollars in the cost of land degradation worldwide. So this is a very, very, very important issue that also is precluding the achievement of sustainable development goals in drylands. And the last one that I would like to mention, which of course, as you can imagine, you can guess which one will be if this machine works. No, sorry, something very important before moving to that. Traditionally, many countries have think that land degradation issues, desertification by definition only affect to drylands, but land degradation affects everyone everywhere. And for many years, particularly developed countries in non-dryland environments, always have viewed land degradation as a dryland problem. Something, this is a problem of the global south. We don't need to pay much attention to this. But this is not true. This is a map we just got 2 days ago, thanks to Emilio Grado, who's a postdoc in my lab. This is using the latest data available and the methodology, the standardized methodology put forward by the UNCCD, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, and I will mention it later. In red, we can see the parts of the land today that are degraded according to this official methodology. And you can see that they are all over the world. Of course, many dryland countries are affected, of course, and a big chunk of the dryland surfaces in countries like Australia, for instance, but you can see that this is a global problem that affects everyone, everywhere. And that's something very, very important to keep in mind. And the last challenge I would like to mention, which you can imagine is very important also for everyone, but particularly for drylands, is climate change. I don't need to talk too much about climate change. We all know about the challenges, we all know about the issues about climate change, but what I would like just to point is about its importance for a country, for instance, like Saudi Arabia, are the magnitude of the change, right? As you know, when modeling climate change, we always play with the scenarios, emission, what we call socioeconomical scenarios that depending on the amount of greenhouse gas that we emit, warming will be higher or lower. But something that is all the simulations, no matter which scenario you take into account, the degree of warming in Saudi Arabia is far away, much higher than the global degree of warming. And why this is particularly important for this country? Because of things like this, it's estimated that by the end of the century, cities like Riyadh or Daman will experience more than 2 months with temperatures above 35 degrees. That means that for 2 months, temperatures will be quite dangerous for many people, people with asthma, old people that are working outside, the conditions are going to be really, really difficult to live in many, some of the places might just go beyond the thermal tolerance of the human body. And of course, we will not be able to live in some places without air conditioning. But this is only estimates for some of the scenarios. Estimates of summer temperatures in many places of Saudi Arabia will be over 50 degrees. So that means that even animals like the oryx that are very well adapted to this environment may die because the temperatures are way above their thermal tolerance. So this is really a very serious issue that in dryland countries in general, but in Saudi Arabia in particular, we need to be quite worried about. And we're talking about climate change and water availability are very strongly related. So 1 degree of warming more imply less water because, we lose water for evaporation because more temperature means higher evapotranspiration and more temperature means higher consumption of water. So if you look at the scenarios, for instance, I just put an example. There are many, many studies done. We could be talking also about this issue for very long. And anyway, it doesn't work. Well, anyway, so what I just wanted to show is that, perfect, thanks a lot. It's, let's say, if you just want to show the areas where water stress is going to increase from here to 2050, lots of them, most of them, not all, but most of them are located in dryland environments. And look, Saudi Arabia, most of the country will be under severe water stress. So again, water stress, climate change go hand by hand. And if you look, all these challenges are quite well interconnected, right? Because particularly connected about water. That is something that is a very scarce resource in dryland environments. Okay, we are talking about problems, we are talking about challenges. And sometimes people, when talking about these issues, say, okay, what we can do? Just stay in my bed and not going out? No, of course, it's really a challenge. There are many, many challenges. But there are also many things we can do. If not to achieve, because maybe, achieving all sustainable development goals, this will never happen, but that doesn't mean that we can advance towards achieving them. We may not achieve them fully, but we can really make lots of progress to achieve as many of them as possible and as much of each of them as possible. And what we can do, well, let's start from the beginning. We need to invest on people. We need to invest particularly in the development of people in developing countries in particular. And we need to invest in the development of women. I'm not going to talk about this. There's a huge literature, a growing one, that every single indicator you look at, social indicators, health indicators, economic indicators, environmental indicators, they improve when the education of women in developing countries increase. So this is a #1 target for any development program and for any governmental program, in general worldwide, but particularly in developing countries. We also, of course, need to increase agricultural production. And we need to, particularly in developing countries, because as I said before, in many developed countries, we produce more than we really need, right? But this doesn't happen in many developing countries. So in those countries, we need to increase agricultural production. And it's our responsibility as developed nations to help them to do that. We have the technology, we have the varieties, we have the know-how. And if we don't have it, we know how we may get it, because we are particularly in a place like this where we are scientists, right? We know what we should try to do in order to improve it, in this case, agricultural production yield, and to pass that information to developing nations. And related to this, of course, is fundamental to improve governance and to reduce inequalities, which are also at the roots of many social and environmental problems. As you can imagine, something fundamental, we need to reduce water use. We need to save water. And again, here we could talk about for hours about what we can do to save water. There are many, many, many things that we can do, both as individuals, as communities, as governments, and as supranational institutions like the European Union. And of course, here the solutions will depend a lot depending on the sector and the place where we are looking at. But we as individuals save as much water as possible. Countries like Spain clearly need to reduce the amount of irrigated crops. Countries like Saudi Arabia do the same and put their efforts on growing, for instance, in greenhouses that are much more water efficient than in open fields, that in an environment like this, all the water you irrigate, it quickly goes because plants will transpire most of this water very quickly. So, and so on and so forth. So it's fundamental that we reduce water use, and particularly that we really value much more our aquifers. Because I like to say that aquifers are like our savings bank. You have a savings account with $100, right? If every month you take out $5, but every month you only can put $1, you don't need to do a degree to realize that at some point you are going to run out of money. Aquifers is the same. If we take out water from the aquifers at a much higher rate than it's being replenished by natural ways, we are going to run out of water. And of course, here technologies like desalination, reclaim of wastewater can help, for sure can help. And we really need to invest much more in this technology, how to make desalination more efficient, as our colleagues here are doing, how to use more reclaimed wastewater. Of course, we need to use that. How to make the infrastructure needed in our cities to use stormwater, which, both to avoid the floodings that are now becoming more common because of climate change, but to be able to use this water then for gardening or for agriculture. There are lots of solutions that will depend from the place, but we need to keep in mind that we can no longer continue using water as we are using it right now. And of course, related to water is we need to, if it works, I think the next one is we have to reduce. Oh, sorry, can move the next? Because it's the batteries, I think they don't want to work, or the device is not happy with me. Yeah, I think maybe the batteries are not, This is work? Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot, Himanshu. That works much better. So, and of course, we have to end food loss and waste. I don't need to talk too much about we have to do that, right? We have already talked about the huge environmental, economical, and social cost. And I like to say that this is a moral duty. We cannot continue affording throwing away so much food. And this, I know that there is a lot of awareness, not among the population. It's true that not many people, we are not so conscious about the amount of food that we throw away. I know, for instance, that the governments and the Saudi government is very aware of the problem. There are national programs and a commitment to reduce food waste by half by 2030. And that's something that we all have a very important role to play in order to make this a reality. So this is really something, and this is really in our hands, because there are some other problems that are more difficult to achieve, but this is something, just if none of us throw away food at home, can you imagine how many kilograms per year? Remember, the average is 250 kilograms per person. That doesn't mean that we all throw away 250 kilograms, but that means that some people throw away 350 and some people throw away 75. If all of us will throw away 50, can you imagine, the huge difference that we can make just with that? So this can be like a huge difference. And something very important, I haven't talked at all about our research so far, but something really, really important that we also need to do is to preserve the biodiversity we have. I mentioned just at the very beginning the importance of biodiversity, of dryland biodiversity. And this is something that I had devoted most of my research career to try to understand what is the functional role of biodiversity in dryland environments. And no matter if you look, and we have been looking this with microbes, with plants, with mammals, with these wonderful, amazing organisms living on the soil surface, we call biocrust, with lichens, mosses, and a bunch of microorganisms living there. And no matter if you look at them in Spain, no matter if you look at them in South America or at the global scale, we always have seen that more diverse dryland ecosystems can store more carbon, have higher nitrogen cycling rates, have higher resistance to droughts. The impact of disturbances are lower. So we really need to preserve and restore, when possible, the native biodiversity of dry environments. And this is something that is also in our hands. It's in our hands to protect what is left and to try to restore, which is also one of the goals of this Environmental Day and of the Kingdom, to restore what has been gone. And believe it or not, the elephants increase the amount of carbon in the soil. This is also something very, very important. There are very, very wonderful studies showing how the elephants increase carbon storage. So elephants are also contributing to mitigate climate change, and as elephants, many other organisms do. And of course, we need to address climate change, and we need to decarbonize our lifestyle. We need to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, here, there are thousands of reports, articles, and books about how this can be done. And I don't have time to talk about what we can do. But again, I would like to put the focus on the power of food systems and the way we produce and we eat in order to address this problem. For instance, it's estimated that if we continue doing business as usual, producing food and eating as we do now, from 2020 to 2100, these huge numbers. I'm sorry, but I'm not very good with the numbers. And 1,356 billion tons of carbon. That's a lot of carbon. I don't know, but it's a very large number. And this is how much of this amount we can reduce if we address different things related to food systems. For instance, if we use high yield varieties, we can achieve a 14% reduction. If we reduce food waste by half, we are not talking about removal completely, but just by half globally, man, we can reduce up to 30%. And if we move to a plant-rich diet, that doesn't mean that we all become vegetarians or vegan. It's just that we reduce the amount of meat and we increase the amount of vegetables, we can get an staggering half of the reduction. And if we combine several of those, we could even make food systems have a negative carbon balance, meaning that they no longer are part of the problem, but become a solution, because they really can be quite effective on mitigating climate change. So that's something that really we need to put food systems on top of any discussion about decarbonizing our lifestyle and about climate change, of course. And of course, we need to restore degraded land, right? Again, this is one of the key topics of this day, and is one of the main efforts that this country is doing for the environment. As you all know, we are now with the Saudi Green Initiative. There is the pledge to plant over 10 billion trees in the kingdom, over 50 billion trees across the Middle East, to protect 30% of the land surface. So these are very, very ambitious goals. And of course, these are very, very important goals, and we need all to push them to achieve them. But when talking about restoration, something very important that not many people have in mind is we need to restore croplands. We need to move from the intensive agriculture, where we remove everything on the land that is not a crop, to make use of biodiversity to help us to grow food and to mitigate climate change at the same time. It's estimated that if we will be able to increase just 0.4% of soil carbon in the soil, we will be able to increase water rotation for over almost 40 billion cubic meters of water, which again, I'm not good with the numbers, but it's a huge amount of water. We could increase the yield of main crops up to 40%, and we could compensate for up to 10% of human emissions. How can we do that? Just doing something as simple as let the plants growing in the middle of the trees in orchards. This will, increase carbon in the soil, reduce evapotranspiration, increase biodiversity. Is a win-win. And also in crops that are not trees, when harvest is done, leave the rest of the in situ. So this plant material eventually will decompose, will increase carbon in the soil, will attract, improve soil biodiversity, and again, this protect the soil against water losses via evaporation, and it's again a win-win. So if we implement these type of approaches at a scale, we could make a huge difference. And we're talking about restoration. Of course, it's important to plant trees and grasses and shrubs, but this could be even more important, and this is not always on the table. We're talking about land restoration. And I'm finishing, believe me. Something also very important, we also need to unleash the power of research, the power of education, the power of creativity, human creativity, and the power of young people. Many of the solutions that will come in a few years from now or in a decade from now are not on the table today. We need to develop them. We need to do research more research in these topics in this country, for instance. We need to engage and attract the bright, all the wonderful, bright young people. Of course, it's very important. Medicine, artificial intelligence, engineers, all this is very important, of course. But we need also to attract them to the environment because they will help us, or they will lead the solving of the problems that are affecting all of us. And of course, we also need to put our knowledge into action, with companies, startups like Himanshu, other wonderful companies and startups coming up from KAUST and from everywhere. So this is fundamental. And I will finish now just with a wonderful quote by the UN Secretary, Antonio Guterres, I think. I'm saying my Portuguese is not very good. Something that is very important, and comes to what I said before. We depend on land for our survival. We are not birds. We don't fly. We live on the land. Land feed us. Land host us. Everything we do is on the land. But we treat it like dirt. We don't care. It's like, we degrade it all the time without even realizing. So we really need to realize about the importance of land, and land need to be on the table of all the environmental discussions, particularly if we want to achieve environmental development goals. And now we have a wonderful opportunity to engage with land, with the COP. I mentioned before the UNCCD, the United Nations Conventions to Combat Desertification. And this year we have the unique opportunity for the first time in the history of the kingdom that the next COP will be hosted by Saudi Arabia. COP is a conference of parties. It's where all the countries that have signed the convention, which for this is 196 countries, gather together to discuss how to advance the goals of the convention, which for the UNCCD, as you can imagine, is to reduce land degradation, to enhance land restoration, and to contribute, of course, to achieve multiple sustainable development goals. And in December in Riyadh, so there are multiple ways you can get engaged. Go to the webpage to learn more. And KAUST we will be present at the COP. We want to get a presence as wide as possible. And if you are interested, want to engage, and you don't know how, let us know. And with this, I will finish. Oh my goodness, I have been talking more than I was planning to. And thanks a lot for your attention. And if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to try to answer them. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor, for this interesting talk. Also, I would like to thank to the Office of Sustainability, Graduate Affairs, and Students for Sustainability for making this seminar possible. Thank you so much for coming. See you next time.